Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are calibrating the time circuits for a very specific frequency. We're dialing it back to the autumn of 1984. But we aren't heading to Hollywood or Wall Street.
Yeah.
We are dropping right onto the pavement, specifically the windswept, gritty pavement of Chicago.
It's a fascinating setting. We're leaving the cornfields of Ohio behind and heading straight into the Windy City at a moment when the economy was shifting, technology was pivoting, and social rules were, well, let's just say they were rigid.
Right, yeah.
It's that precise moment when a young person steps off the bus and realizes, the safety net is gone.
And our guide for this trip isn't a historian or a sociologist. We're working from a really raw, candid transcript of a personal memoir. It's from a source called The Real World, which aired on the More Than Transgender podcast.
And what I appreciate about this source is that it just captures that universal fresh out of high school panic, but it layers it with very specific 1980s textures. So we aren't just talking about growing up in the abstract, we're talking about navigating the corporate game before the internet. The specific anxieties of military service for a closeted gay person before Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and this incredibly complex relationship between a father and child.
That father-child dynamic is really the spine of this whole story. So let's set the scene properly. The narrator has just graduated high school in Ohio. They've packed their bags, moved back to Chicago to live with their dad, and right away, the source gives us this environmental threat. They call it the Chicago hawk.
And if you haven't lived in Chicago, you might think they're talking about a bird.
Right.
They are not. The hawk is that brutal, cutting wind that comes off Lake Michigan. It cuts right through your coat, right through your layers. It's the kind of cold that feels, personal.
It's a great metaphor for the reality check the narrator is facing. You step off the bus, and the environment is immediately hostile. It demands respect. But the dad, he's interesting. He's not waiting with a warm hug. Not necessarily, but he is prepared. He's already set up an apartment for them.
Right, and the location is key here. It's only a couple of blocks from where the narrator grew up as a small child. So you have this physical return to the nest, to the roots. But the context is totally different.
Oh, completely.
The narrator notes that while they're back in the old neighborhood, the stakes have changed. They aren't a kid playing in the street anymore. They have to survive on their own terms now.
And survival in 1984 meant playing a role. The narrator calls it the corporate game. This felt like a costume fitting to me.
It essentially was. I mean, you have to remember, 1984 is the gestation period for peak yuppie culture. The aesthetic of success was very specific, very buttoned down. The narrator talks about going on the shopping trip to get the uniform because you couldn't just walk into an office in jeans.
No. The list is so vivid. Nice sweaters, button-up shirts, ties, and wool slacks. No hoodies, no remote work pajamas. You had to look the part to even get in the door.
But there is one detail in this whole wardrobe prep that really it stops you in your tracks.
The shoes.
The shoes.
I love this detail. It turns out the narrator and their father wore the same size shoe.
So for practicality, or maybe to save money, because setting up a new life is expensive, the father just hands down these dress shoes he doesn't wear anymore. And the narrator admits it felt kind of weird.
It's almost too on the nose as a literary device, isn't it?
It really is.
You are literally stepping into your father's shoes to learn how to be a man in the world.
It's this physical manifestation of expectation. You are walking the path he walked, quite literally. Every step the narrator takes into a job interview, they are wearing the history of their father. But what's interesting is that while the shoes fit, the path is going to diverge pretty sharply.
Before the divergence, though, we have to talk about the work itself. The narrator hits the temp agencies.
Yeah.
For our younger listeners, we should probably clarify what that even looked like in the mid-'80s.
Yeah.
This wasn't logging into an app and picking up a gig.
No. This was a physical grind. You went to a brick-and-mortar office, you took skills tests, and you waited by a landline phone. And the currency of value in 1984, typing speed.
The narrator mentions office experience, specifically meaning typing. And this is the big one, knowing your way around a word processor.
That was the dividing line. Blue-collar and white-collar entry level. Today we think of word processing as just opening an app. But back then, these were dedicated machines. We're likely talking about like Wang systems or early IBM terminals.
Yeah.
They had their own codes, their own command structures. If you could operate a word processor, you were technically a skilled laborer. You were employable.
The source mentions another piece of tech that gave me a massive flashback. Microfiche.
Oh, wow.
The narrator talks about spending days handling microfilm and microfiche.
Talk about a lost art. For those who don't know, microfiche was basically the analog version of a PDF archive. You had these tiny photographs of documents on a sheet of film, and you had to sit at this massive machine with a backlight and a lens to magnify it.
The whirring sound of those
Mhm.
machines, it's hypnotic. And the smell of the warm plastic.
It creates such a specific image of the work environment. It's repetitive, it's detail-oriented, and it's transient. The narrator talks about jobs lasting 3 or 4 weeks.
Just enough.
It's enough to pay the bills, but it's not a career. It's just treading water. You're a cog in a machine that you don't really understand.
Which creates this tension. The narrator has entertainment dreams. They want to perform, they want to be creative. But during the day, they are filing microfiche in wool slacks and their dad's shoes. And I think that boredom, that sense of, is this it, leads to the first major plot twist.
The Navy.
The Navy.
The seat of the pants decision.
It comes out of nowhere. The narrator just decides, I'm going to join the Navy.
It's impulsive, sure, but look at the context. An uncle had a career in the service. And in the 80s, the military was marketed heavily as the ultimate stabilizer. It's not just a job, it's an adventure, right? If the temp life feels flimsy and directionless, the Navy feels concrete. It offers a script for life.
Even if, as the narrator admits, they weren't a strong swimmer.
Which you'd think would be a bit of a disqualifier for a maritime career, but
Yeah.
it just shows how desperate they were for a change in narrative. I don't care if I can't swim, just get me out of this temp job and give me a purpose.
Now, we have to look at the dad's reaction here.
Yeah.
Because the narrator coins a phrase that I think perfectly encapsulates a certain generation of parenting. Backhand discouragement.
It's such a powerful phrase. It's not a direct no. It's not an explicit forbidding. It's a question or a comment that just undermines your confidence enough to make you doubt yourself. It's a psychological check hook.
We see it twice. First, with the word processing. The narrator is learning this valuable tech skill, and the dad asks, why do you always choose the most difficult careers?
Which is just absurd, logically. Word processing was a desk job. It wasn't coal mining, it wasn't deep sea fishing. But to the father, maybe anything abstract or new, anything that wasn't working with your hands, seemed unnecessarily complicated.
But then, the Navy pivot happens.
Yeah.
And the backhand turns into something else. The dad says, oh wow, Navy'd make a man out of you.
Oof. That has to sting. It implies that currently, in the father's eyes, you aren't one.
Right. It frames the military not as a career choice, but as a corrective measure, a fix for a perceived deficit.
And knowing what we know, that the narrator is gay, that make a man out of you comment, is loaded with so much extra weight.
Oh, absolutely.
It's the father projecting a hope that the military will straighten out his son, in every sense of the word. It's the hope that the discipline will mold him into the traditional image of masculinity the father understands.
So the narrator goes for it. They go to the processing center. And this scene, it's straight out of a movie, but a very stressful one. It's the cattle call.
Rows of young men in their underwear.
And this is where the historical context of 1984 is so crucial. We aren't just talking about modesty here.
No. We are talking about a time when homosexuality was an absolute bar to service. This is pre-don't ask, don't tell. If you were discovered to be gay, you were out, often with a dishonorable discharge that could ruin your future. The stakes were incredibly high.
So the narrator is standing there in his underwear, surrounded by other men in their underwear. And he has this internal monologue that is funny, but also
Terrifying.
terrifying. He's praying, God, please let me pass this physical, but please do not let me get an erection.
It's a moment of high biological treason. His body is reacting to the stimulus-attractive guys everywhere, but his survival depends on suppressing that reaction. It's a perfect storm of anxiety. You have the exam, the father's expectation, and the pressure of hiding your identity all happening in one cold medical room.
He makes it through that part. He passes the written exam. He passes the hearing exam. He has exceptional hearing, actually. But then he hits the heart station.
The murmur.
The doctors find an irregularity. Now, the narrator knew about this. He'd been told about it before, but didn't think it was a deal breaker. The Navy disagrees. But instead of an immediate no, they do something that sets up the most sitcom-esque sequence of the story.
They send him home with a Holter monitor. It's a portable tape recorder wired to his chest to track his heart rhythm over 48 hours.
And the instructions are key. Don't change anything. Do what you normally do.
Which is standard medical advice. They want a baseline. They want to see what his heart does during a typical weekend. But the narrator, well, he takes normal life to the absolute limit.
He goes roller skating.
Roller skating in the 80s. which isn't a gentle glide around the park. This is basically high-intensity cardio set to a disco beat.
And, let's be clear, he also has sex.
Right. So you have a young man wearing a government-issued medical tracking device, physically exerting himself on a roller rink, and then engaging in sexual activity.
The data on that tape must have been wild. Just spikes everywhere.
I imagine the Navy cardiologist looking at the readout on Monday morning and thinking, is this kid running marathons? Is he being chased by bears? What is happening in Chicago?
Unsurprisingly, the Navy calls back and says, yeah, no thanks. Too risky.
Rejected.
Now, usually in the hero's journey story, this is the low point, the all is lost moment. The dad wanted him to be a man. The Navy says he's physically unfit. He should be devastated.
But he isn't.
Not at all.
He's relieved. And this is where the narrator shows a lot of maturity looking back. He says, I wasn't bothered anyway. He realized that being stuck on a ship with, as he puts it, all those horny men would have been a disaster waiting to happen.
He says, I'm sure I wasn't the only one that tried to slide into the Navy, which is true. Thousands did. But he recognized that inevitably he would have been caught.
The rejection was a blessing. It saved him from a likely dishonorable discharge, or worse. It kept him in Chicago, on land, where he could actually figure out who he was without the threat of military justice hanging over his head.
Which brings us back to the streets. The Navy door is closed. The temp job door is revolving. But the social door kicks wide open. The narrator starts finding his tribe.
This is so crucial for survival in any big city, but especially for a young queer person in the 80s. The biological family provides the apartment, but the chosen family provides the street smarts.
He mentions hanging out with drag queens and gay men who weren't too scary, too crazy, but who, knew the ropes.
They taught him how to survive on the streets if I ever needed to. That phrasing is so ominous. It implies that the safety of the apartment wasn't guaranteed. There was always a sense that if Dad finds out or if the temp work dries up, I need a plan B.
They weren't just friends, they were professors of survival.
Exactly.
And that street education gets put to the test in what I think is the most important scene in this memoir, the grocery incident.
This is the pivot point. It's where the two worlds, the father's world and the street world, collide right in the kitchen.
So the narrator comes home one night with $60 worth of groceries. Now, we need to adjust for inflation here. In 1984, $60 isn't just a loaf of bread.
No.
That is a full cart of food. That's steaks, that's canned goods, that's a feast.
For a temp worker living check to check, dropping $60 at once is a huge red flag. It signals a windfall that doesn't match the pay stub.
The dad sees the bags and asks the obvious question, where did you get the money?
And the narrator lies. He says, from a friend.
The dad's response is just chilling in its accuracy. He says, no one just gives someone money.
It's a cynical worldview, but in the city, it's a correct one. The father cuts right through the lie. He knows that money is an exchange. If you didn't work a shift for it, you traded something else.
The narrator says, I knew right then that he knew I had done something with someone for money.
We're talking about survival sex, transactional sex. The father knows it. The son knows he knows. The air in that room must have been incredibly heavy.
This is the moment where the backhand discouragement dad could have exploded. He could have said, not under my roof. He could have thrown the shoes and the son out the door.
But he doesn't. And this is what makes this deep dive so complex. The source says the dad had some sharp words. He made his displeasure known. But he didn't demand the details. He didn't force a confession. He didn't kick him out.
The narrator says, he took damn good care of me and asked for nothing in return.
It's a profound form of acceptance. It's not the pride parade acceptance we might look for today. It's a gritty, silent agreement. The father essentially decides that keeping his son safe and housed is more important than enforcing his own moral code or punishing the behavior.
It connects back to that idea of making a man out of him. Maybe the dad realized that the narrator was surviving. He was bringing home groceries. It wasn't pretty. It wasn't how the dad would have done it, but he was doing it.
It's benign neglect as a parenting strategy. He gave the narrator room. The narrator explicitly says, I give my dad props, though. He gave me plenty of room to figure life out for myself. Sometimes giving someone room means turning a blind eye so they can make it to the next day.
And figuring it out is messy. It involves failed physicals, risky nights out, and what the narrator calls the time of my life.
It's a paradox, isn't it? If you look at the facts broke, rejected by the military, doing sex work for groceries, eating cheap food, it sounds like a tragedy. But the narrator remembers it as a golden age.
We can't forget the diet that fueled this golden age.
Noodles and fries.
The carbohydrate load of the young and invincible.
It's such a sensory detail. You can picture them sitting in a diner or that small kitchen, eating a plate of beige food, but feeling like the world is wide open.
That's the intoxication of independence. Even if you're struggling, it's your struggle. You aren't in high school anymore. You're navigating the Chicago Hawk, you're navigating the underground scene, and you're still standing. It's a story about resilience, but a very specific 1980s brand of resilience. It wasn't about therapy or self-care routines. It was about wool slacks, street smarts, and keeping your secrets just quiet enough to keep your apartment.
And having a parent who, despite all his gruffness and backhand comments, ultimately acted as a safety net. He didn't pull the net away when things got ugly.
So we've tracked this journey from the temp agency to the Navy doctor's office to the silence of that kitchen. It's a snapshot of a time that feels very distant. Yet the emotions, the desire to prove yourself, the fear of failure, the complexity of family are totally timeless.
Absolutely. It's a reminder that the path to adulthood is rarely a straight line. It's a series of zigzags, rejections, and compromises.
As we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with a thought that really lingers from this story. It's about that moment with the groceries.
The silence in the kitchen.
We often talk about parenting in terms of intervention, what we say, what we teach, how we correct. But the father in this story chose not to intervene when he knew his child was doing something risky.
It forces a difficult question.
When a parent knows their child is walking a dangerous edge to survive, where is the line? Is that silence a form of negligence? Or, in a world as harsh as 1984 Chicago, is that silence actually the ultimate form of trust? A belief that the child needs to walk their own path, even if it hurts, to truly find their way.
It's the difference between protecting someone from the world and supporting them in the world. It's a terrifying distinction for a parent to make.
Something to chew on the next time you think about your own growing pains. Thanks for joining us on The Deep Dive. We'll see you next time.